I met Alejandro well back at a spiritual warfare conference with Father Ripperger, and ever since we've been in touch. Alejandro, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
Good, man. So before we get started here, just want to see if you can introduce yourself to our audience. Who are you? What do you do? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Who am I? What do I do? Well, I'm still wondering who I am, and I still wonder what I do sometimes. But
Sancta Maria, ora pro nobis. Sancta Dei genitrix, ora pro nobis.
I am a Catholic, 24 years old. I live in Southern California in the San Bernardino County Diocese of San Bernardino. I am an active participant at my parish. I am the president and co-founder of the Young Adult Ministry and a founding member of Sacred Blue Productions, a Catholic production company in San Diego. And I'm also a freelance video contractor, and I work with LifeSite News and uh, Lopez Video Productions. And I'm just kind of a little bit, not all over the place, but in different areas involving multimedia. And my passion is filmmaking. I always loved film ever since I was a kid. Fell in love with it when I was in college doing philosophy club. Saw Terrence Malick, that one of his films. The first film I've ever seen was The Tree of Life. He's a Christian filmmaker who has Catholic themes in his films, and I fell in love with his style of filmmaking. It was a little, ironically, unorthodox style as opposed to what we see in most modern culture. And but I, when I saw it, I saw the more spiritual and just very deep
Sure.
and artistic view of cinema, not so much as like not so much to kind of like make it as commentary as most filmmakers do nowadays. It's seeing film as a way of experience, and seeing film as a way to kind of understand the incomprehensible
Mm.
to the human intellect. So I just fell in love with that, and I've always wanted to be a part of it in some capacity. But then I found that it just wasn't like feasible as a career. So I continued persevering my philosophy degree. Somehow found myself doing live streaming for my parish when COVID hit, and then I suddenly found myself applying for an internship at LifeSite News, and then from there,
Sure.
getting that internship in video production, something I never thought I would be doing as a career. Learning how to be an editor, learning this whole other skill set, and then go traveling to Florida to meet my coworkers, and then just sharing the faith with a bunch of people whom I had never met in person before, but talking to each other like family, like we've known each other for years, and then
Sure.
finally, uh, just arriving at the spiritual warfare conference and getting an interview with Father Ripperger, something that I never thought I would ever be doing in my entire life, and getting an interview with Bishop Strickland was, yeah. So you can kind of ask yourself over time, like, how does that happen? How does it happen that you're totally not qualified for that kind of thing? And maybe not totally, but just not like as prepared as you'd expect one to be. Like I didn't go to film school. I didn't go to like JP Catholic and get like a prestigious breadth of knowledge
Sure.
and education. But I do believe that, the passion makes up for that, the desire to show truth, the desire to, you know, display the beauty, the natural beauty of human interaction, the human experience, nature, everything that God has created, and seeing God love and exist in all of it. I feel like that's where, I wouldn't, I guess talent or just, the skill set that you kind of gain from that, where that comes from is that desire to learn more, to desire to comprehend the incomprehensible. It's kind of I guess that's where that came from. But I say this not for my own benefit or for my own glory. I say this because if you're a young person out there who
Yeah,
is seeking sainthood or who is wanting to become more than who they are right now, you have to want it bad enough to say, I'm going to do something to gain this, and I'm going to have to put in the work to get it. So,
that's right. No, it's awesome. And yeah, I said to Alejandro the other day, like we should get ourselves in front of a camera, make a video together. Um, yeah, great testimony, great story. And like you're mentioning again, we're young adults who don't necessarily have it all figured out. Um, but we do know that we're seeking for something. And that's, I think, is the most important part. Our Lord says, seek and ye shall find. And so we're hoping that if we just keep seeking long enough, eventually a door will open, right? And that's exactly right. So it's like through the ordinary things in our daily life, God begins to show himself in an extraordinary way. And I think it's the same way with the saints. I don't think any saint began the path toward holiness realizing like, oh, I'm holy or this is going to happen. I think they just kind of followed the Holy Spirit. They followed divine providence. One door opened at a time. So they took the paths that opened up. And like you mentioned, they're willing to put in the work. They grew in the process. And then slowly but surely, they made it to be a saint. They made it to be who we recognize it. But sometimes, again, the church, you see these saints and you think, well, these people are just a completely different nature. They're made of a different material that we're made of. But the reality is, no, they're human beings and they go through daily struggles. But there are ways to grow in a relationship with God. Again, God doesn't necessarily call the qualified; He qualifies the called. So if our Lord is calling you to something, He's just seeing whether or not you're willing to follow His guidance, follow His steps. So thank you for being here, Alejandro. It's great to have you here. And yeah, today I want to talk again primarily about the liturgy. Both of us are acolytes in the Latin Mass. Um, we both love the Latin Mass, and some people may not understand that. I think a lot of people think, I know there's different perspectives out there, but there's a stereotype within the traditional community to think that traditionalists are all about rules. They don't really have much passion. They don't really have much compassion or charity. But I think otherwise. And before, again, I was in the charismatic renewal. I was in the Novus Ordo Mass, and maybe I had a very similar perspective of the traditionalists. Like, oh, these guys are just very rigorous. Just like traditionalists may think, well, those charismatic people, those Novus Ordo people have no structure. They have no routine at all. They're just pure emotion. And sometimes I would think the same thing, but it's like, oh, maybe that's not the case. However, we do want to help the church grow in this relationship with God, especially as we continue to talk about all the things we're seeing in society as young people. I mean, it's crazy what we're seeing in the culture. We can go on and on about that, but I'm sure many people here know that. Um,
right.
but what's the solution to what we're seeing out there? It's definitely God's grace and the Catholic Church. Father Ripperger, we're just talking about him. He explains that the state of the world is a reflection of the state of the church. So if we sanctify the church, then the world has to follow suit by nature. And I think that's a very important thing for people to understand. Now, to sanctify the church, it's important that our liturgy is properly established because the liturgy, especially the most holy sacrifice of the Mass, is the most perfect prayer. And it's the prayer that's most pleasing to God for a couple of reasons. Primarily because it's our Lord's prayer. So he loves his own prayer the most. It's Christ begging his Father for mercy for his church. And so that's why I want to talk about the liturgy. That's why it's important to me. And hopefully this conversation, any way that we can help people grow when it comes to the liturgy, either engage a little more, pay more attention, be more devout, is going to make a tremendous effect in the world. I truly believe that. You know, if the laity grow in their understanding of the liturgy, more graces are going to be bestowed on the church, and then the world will follow suit. So I know we're talking just one of the many topics, sacred music, because you were just at a conference regarding sacred music, and so that probably would be a good place to start. What are the things you've noticed in the realm of sacred music?
Well, you said a lot of things, and and I think that all of them are kind of relating to like the state of the church. Obviously, like you said, the state of the church. Well, it's not the state of the world. It's the state of the church, and the world has to necessarily follow suit once the state of the church changes. And
Sure.
I think that one of the ways that we can automatically see where the state of the church is at is by examining the music that is present in the liturgies, in the majority of the liturgies. And so, what is music, really? And, and that's not, I mean, I don't want to get into, like, well, the philosophical realm of it. I mean, we've heard many different topics. Like Nietzsche says, like, without music, life would be a mistake. Obviously, that's one, and that's an atheist speaking. And and Saint Augustine, to sing is to pray twice. Well, yes, but what is music at its core? It's, for me, I know I'm not the first person to have said this, but music is trying to take the incomprehensible and trying to comprehend it in such a way where you sense something ethereal, something beautiful, something that no word can simply describe. Like, I'll give you a good example. Do you know Tchaikovsky?
No, I don't actually.
Tchaikovsky. Okay. Well, he composed. Okay. Aside from his personal life,
Sure.
there are rumors about him being homosexual. I don't know if that's true, though some people say there's a lot of evidence to that, unfortunately. But he did compose music for divine liturgy, the Byzantine divine, Orthodox
Sure.
divine liturgy. Byzantine reconciled with the church, but that's a separate topic. But the divine liturgy of Saint John Chrysostom, he composed music. He set the hymn of the cherubim to music. There is like a sound of a soprano, or the sopranos, like they sing, and then you can kind of like hear, like, it's very muted at first, and then the altos join in, and then the tenors, and then the basses, and then you can hear like this all-encompassing sound, like enveloping you. And the point of that music was to make it seem as if you were entering heaven, and that the angels were surrounding you. And that's what the hymn of the cherubim is. It's praising the Lord. And then you hear all this beautiful high notes that just echoing in this chamber that's bouncing off the walls, and then your entire body and your whole being is just enveloped in the sound. And that's what it's supposed to convey when you're in that. And it's one thing to hear it in a recording, but it's a whole other thing to actually be there present and listening
That's
to
right.
it. And even for the supposedly deviant person who could compose this music, have an understanding that this is something that is not supposed to sound like, like ephemeral, or something that's, kind of passionate, but at the same time just flat and unsatisfying. This is supposed to be something that is beyond the senses, something that goes beyond human understanding. And for him to even understand that is indicative of, the reverence that the soul has towards God. And, the music is supposed to reflect that. So going back to, like, the Latin Church, where we're a part of, and what is the music supposed to sound like, and how do we understand it? Is it supposed to be something that's necessarily everyone can participate in? And back in the day, that's how it was. The Gregorian chant was very simple, and it wasn't too complex. And and you see Mozarabic music, I don't know if you know what that is. You probably do. Where it's it has a lot of Eastern influence, where they have like the drone, like kind of sound,
Sure.
and then on top of it, and then that's the solemn tone, and then it's supposed to convey like this otherworldly, ethereal music. But it's also meant for the congregation to kind of join in, or like even young men who were entering into the vocational. Entering into the vocation of the priesthood, it's kind of what they're answering, like a call and response to God, where that's the response, the church's response to her bridegroom. And that's what kind of sacred music is for us in the Latin Church. And and then when you see this group of young men who are going to read Vespers, especially if you're, I wouldn't say you're an acolyte, but if you're part of the Schola, or you could be an acolyte at one point, you can switch off. I went to the oratory of Saints Gregory and Augustine, and you could just see this group of young men all lining up, the Cantori Sancti Ludovici, that's the singers of St. Louis, that are all lining up to go do Vespers, and they're all dressed up in their castles and their surplices. And you kind of already know that this is meant for God, and this is meant for other people to participate. This is supposed to be one united prayer to God. That's what music is supposed to do. It's supposed to not merely supplement it, but to bring it to another level. To bring the prayer to another level. And I feel like that, how does Agnus Dei qui tollis peccata mundi miserere nobis, how does that compare to Agnus Dei, you take away the sins of the world? Not to knock the Novus Ordo, but I'm actually pointing out the differences in it. How did we go from something that is slow, meditative, and quiet in music, whereas something where the notes here, you can kind of hear the up and down, and it's okay, yes, we're going along. This is interesting. This is entertaining. Dare I say amusing, in a sort of way. How did we go from over here to this other end? Two very different interpretations of the same words, the same Latin. Right? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. No, very, very great points. One thing I did want to, and again, I'm going to approach this primarily in this video from a layman's terms.
Of course.
We could go into documents, we could go into the other side, but I think this is going to help us the most. People's response to your question may be something to the effect of, well, not everyone can sing that kind of music. Or, most choirs I've talked to about sacred music, they're like, yeah, that's awesome, and I'd love to do that, but I don't know how to do it, or it's too difficult for me to do. And I have to tell you, we're both acolytes. When I was invited to be an acolyte, when I wanted to become an acolyte, I saw that all that it would entail at the altar. And I knew off the bat, that's going to be challenging. That's going to be hard. And I could have told them, well, how can you expect me to memorize all those lines? Or it's too difficult for me. You should make it easier for me so that I can do my job better. No, but like you're mentioning, no, this is for God. And that has to be at the center. This is for God. And you have to challenge yourself in order to do it. And I think that is really what makes all the difference. That's why, when I serve at the altar, I take it seriously, because I realize I had to study for months for this, even if you have to practice tirelessly, that's something that we should be willing to do as Catholics.
Yes. And in response to I'm going to call it an excuse, because it is an excuse.
Sure.
That we can't sing that. It's too difficult. No one's asking you to sing all 4 parts of the polyphony, okay? Salve Regina Solemn Tone, even I am having trouble with that. But I'll put it to you this way. If you can listen for... I'm going to sound very condescending. If you can listen to 21 Pilots or Taylor Swift on repeat for 100 hours, and, anything on the radio, for example, and you're willing to give that as much of your attention as much attention as you give it, how hard is it to actually listen to chant and like kind of memorize words. Like I've had to like rush on my phone and download chant sheets and like listen to the tone over and over, get my piano and like follow the and try to hear the melody and memorize it. Like it is kind of hard to do, but it is like rewarding once you are able to sing an entire line by yourself and actually um, sing
Sure.
it during mass and be able to perform it in such a manner that is fitting for all who hear it and for God, and just kind of because music is a testimony to God's beauty, God's creation, and it's not. And I don't know if you heard about like in this. I'm losing my train of thought slowly, so
Sure.
trying
No
to
worries.
jump back on. But like, I don't know if you've heard about like the recordings that they had up in space about there's like certain frequencies where you hear music like
Okay.
432 hertz, and then there's a sort of like melodic sound that all the birds and all the animals below are making, and it's kind of sounds like music,
Hmm.
and it's a very odd but very not dissonant but harmonious music
Hmm.
that all comes together. And I'm just like sitting there, it's like thinking, well, I mean, it's kind of absurd for anybody to say that this isn't intelligently designed or this wasn't meant to be the way it is.
Hmm.
And so, where music, as humans make it, it is melodious and it is harmonious and it's beautiful. And like, to think of it as like difficult or complicated. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to go up to a piano and play Rachmaninoff, and nobody's asking me to. Not even
Sure.
in chant. I mean, nobody's asking you
That's right.
to like I said, sing four parts of polyphony, or to necessarily do solemn tones for an entire mass or so. I mean, but try it somewhere. Start somewhere with the simple
Sure.
tones. Start like understanding, but this goes back to my introduction. It's like, do you want it bad enough? Do you desire it? Do you really love God that much to actually devote your time to something that may seem like a giant? But if you really love it, if you have like a reverence for it, then it shouldn't be as difficult as you make it to be, because whatever
Sure.
difficulties come, is like you said, I mean, it's a challenge. I mean, the church never stopped challenging men and women to be the
Hmm.
very best. I mean, the
That's
church
right.
never done that, but I think somewhere along the way, the mindset suddenly switched from being one where sacrifice and suffering was a necessary part of living the Christian life, and now it's do whatever makes you feel good. And it's something inherently hedonistic, where pleasure is the natural good, and
Hmm.
like pain is the natural bad. But how did we throw away, the virtues of the irascible appetites, and take into account that the idea that we should only follow the concupiscible appetites, and
Sure.
that ventures into Aquinas and to mystic philosophy and theology. But
Yeah.
I mean, but this is the mindset that we've developed.
Hmm.
Is that there? I mean, if Jesus loves you, Jesus will take you as you are. Sure. I mean, but you're missing the entire context of what the Christian spirit is, and and if you can look at the cross and say that that was all sunshine and roses, then you're sorely mistaken, my friend. I mean, it has to be involve some sort of suffering.
Sancte Stephane, ora pro nobis. Sancte Laurenti, ora pro nobis.